For me, with the exception of a couple of things I play on the PS5, I game exclusively on Linux. And to people who don't game on Linux, I feel like SteamOS is a giant red herring, completely distracting people from the actual state of Linux gaming today, and how easy it is to go from a completely clean install system to gaming on Linux. This is not, 2010, where you'd have to configure Wine and basically nothing would work. This is an early Proton where you would have to go and set some weird environment variables, install some weird packages, and then it would start working. Today, in 2025, it is dead simple. You install a distro, you install Steam, you game. But no matter how much this discussed, the current gamer meme is SteamOS on the desktop is going to make Linux gaming viable, good, whatever term you want to use. And just the other day, Linus Tech Tips put out another Linux gaming video. Now you may recall the Linux Daily Driver Challenge, and I'm just going to be honest here, it was an absolute disaster, made worse by the fact that Linus was just not at all reading what was happening on the screen, not willing to do any research on problems, and it was a mess. This video, however, isn't like last time. This isn't some weird system which barely works under Windows. This is, I basically built a Linux gaming box. It's gonna go under my TV, something like that. It's your home theater gaming system, and what is it like actually gaming on a machine like that? So let's not waste any more time and get right into it.
There's so many rumors swirling around Valve lately. A new Steam controller in mass production, Steam Link on Raspberry Pi 5, new branding guidelines suggesting powered by SteamOS consoles. Is that for handhelds like this one from Lenovo? Or is it for the return of Steam Machine game consoles?
Honestly, it's probably for both of them. The actual console thing is still very much we know a code name, we know a couple of little things about it, but hopefully that becomes a thing. That would be really cool.
Either way, it really looks like Valve is ramping up to make a serious challenge to Microsoft's desktop dominance. And I sure hope they do. Some of you probably remember that Valve's SteamOS started as a response to the threat of Microsoft creating a walled garden with Windows 8.
The only problem is that first attempt, that being the Steam machines, was a colossal failure. The idea back then was to get game developers to actually port their game to Linux. Proton didn't exist yet, Wine did exist, but Valve had nothing to do with it. And even though it was a failure, I do think ultimately it was a required step, because what it did is got Valve to focus on Proton and also brought the idea of gaming on a Linux machine more into the zeitgeist, because you've always been able to game on Linux, right? There has been Quake and things like that, but not for a long time, right? In the era of Steam, Linux gaming wasn't really a thing. And when Proton came out, even though it wasn't really that great early on, it gave a couple of years of improvements and improvements and improvements, and people may have heard about it here and there. So when the Steam Deck actually came out, people had all of these years of context to know there is a lot of work that has been done to make Linux gaming actually viable.
8, a threat that not only hasn't gone away, but might be even greater than ever with the consolidation of the Xbox and Windows stores. There's only one small problem. As good as SteamOS is, delivering a console-like gaming experience for thousands of PC games,
well, most of what you get from SteamOS is literally available on every other distro. It is Steam in big picture mode using Proton. All of that is present on every other install in Steam on every other distro. There are some other little tweaks that are nice to have, but for the most part, SteamOS isn't anything special specifically for this. It's just a vessel to deliver the rest of the software they're working on.
Even ones that were only ever intended to run on Windows.
To be fair, most of the games on Steam are only intended to run on Windows. There is a very small number of games that have ever been ported. A lot of indie games, but honestly, if you're going to do a bad port, I would just suggest not even bothering doing it.
Valve still hasn't made a version that's designed for me to put on my custom PC. Or have they?
Yeah, you could probably tell where this video is gonna go.
As it turns out, Valve has been working away in the background, preparing SteamOS for its promised official wide release.
It's kind of hard to say because, yes, they've been making a lot of changes for things that aren't necessarily in the Steam Deck, and there are some changes in there specifically related to NVIDIA cards, and then changes for things like the Asus ROG Ally, but I don't know if they're ever intending it to be like a desktop system, or if it's supposed to be something always intended for these handheld devices.
So I think now is as good a time as any to see what the experience is like if you download SteamOS and throw it on your PC.
Yeah. You know exactly where this is going now.
Before you type that comment, yes, I know I don't need to wait for SteamOS to be a Linux gamer.
Absolutely.
But in spite of what your friendly neighborhood neckbeard may claim,
that's me. I'm the friendly neighborhood neckbeard.
Most Linux distros still involve a lot of manual faffing about to get things working.
No. Now, yes, if we're talking about an NVIDIA GPU, 100% that is annoying. And yes, if you have some weird hardware. However, if we are talking about the distros that people actually use, because yes, technically, most distros are annoying to set up, but most distros are hobby projects that no normal person should actually run. For your Ubuntu, Manjaro, Endeavor, Mint, Fedora, things like that of the world, especially for the machine being used in this video, which is a full AMD machine, pretty much what you do is install the distro, install Steam, play. That is all. Now, if you're like me, and you're an Arch Linux user, by the way, absolutely it's going to require a bit of faffing about to get things working. Just don't use Arch. The reason why Linux gaming was difficult for Linus last time, for anyone who doesn't remember the Linux Gaming Challenge, the Linux Daily Driver Challenge, Linus had a really weird system that basically no one else has. It relies on like a Thunderbolt dock to get the displays working. It was him not reading error messages. There was specifically a once-in-a-lifetime Pop!OS bug at the very time he did the video that caused the desktop to be deleted. That was fixed like 3 years ago now. But I will agree that there are a lot of people who will try out Linux who are just as incompetent at using Linux as Linus is. And for those people, I guess the knowledge that it's made by Valve might give you a bit more hope, I guess, and you might actually pay attention to what's going on.
That is why we need SteamOS. Projects like HoloISO, Chimera, Bazite, and the other one that you're furiously typing in the comments right now.
I actually didn't realize that this one existed. I knew about Hannah Montana Linux, but not Bebian.
Are glimpses at a beautiful penguin-powered future that could be, but the fact of the matter is that barring some kind of earth-shaking change, when regular people make the great penguin migration, it's going to be on a steam-powered train.
Here's the thing. If people need to copium themselves into using Linux by SteamOS being the thing they use, honestly, I don't think that's a bad thing, right? Like, if that's the assurance you need to finally try out Linux, I do think you're focusing on something that doesn't actually matter, but at least you're trying out Linux.
As we're filming this, there are two ways for a non-developer to get SteamOS 3. Option 1, buy a Steam Deck.
The only thing you should be doing if you're talking about running SteamOS, I guess if you really want to run it on like the Asus ROG Ally or something like that, hey, go ahead, but like, stop with the desktop thing.
Easy, but you're stuck with the Steam Deck. Option 2, download the Steam Deck recovery image, flash that to a USB key, and install it on compatible hardware.
As I said, that is what this video is about.
Valve is committed to making a proper installer before the full release, but that's the way.
Especially if people are going to keep trying to do this, I kind of hope they just put something together, because people are not going to stop doing so.
You do it now. Less easy. And it doesn't help that at the time of filming, Googling install SteamOS actually leads you to the build your own Steam machine page.
This is something they do need to actually deal with, because it looks like it's talking about installing it on an actual desktop system, building a Steam machine. It looks like it's a continuation of that idea, but it's not at all.
For the old Debian-based SteamOS 2 from like a decade ago. That's kind of rough for Joey. Though, to Valve's credit, at least it links to the page for the Steam Deck.
This thing should be like right at the top in a giant yellow banner. Better yet, this page should be archived and made very, very clear that this is not the thing you're looking for.
But does it work? Well, the thing is, we won't know until we reboot.
Remember, this is a image for the Steam Deck, not a generic ISO like you would have for, say, Ubuntu or Fedora or something else like that.
Because everything that you've seen so far can be done even on unsupported hardware. What do you mean, unsupported, Linus? Linux supports, like, everything, doesn't it? Well,
most things.
Yes, but also no. Linux is an umbrella term that we use to describe many distinct computing experiences.
Actually, Linux just refers to the kernel, and a collection of the kernel and software is referred to as a distro. I actually don't care and fully support Linus saying this. I don't like the distinction that it's not an operating system. Linux is just the kernel. No, it's an operating system now. Get over it. It's the word we use, and that's fine.
It's up to the maintainer of the Linux distribution to decide what it does and doesn't do out of the box. And as you'd imagine, the Steam Deck recovery image is developed for, well, the Steam Deck first and foremost.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of drivers that just don't exist because it's for the Steam Deck and nothing else. And you're probably going to run into some problems with that.
Which results in some key hardware requirements. The big two being a discrete AMD GPU and an NVMe boot drive to install to. Also, this is fun, during the setup process, there is not any kind of prompt for which drive or which partition you'd like to install to.
Yeah, because the Steam Deck doesn't do that. It just has a drive. You install SteamOS on it and there you go. You actually can dual boot on the machine. I have seen people doing that. It's just a lot more additional hassle to do so.
Self-warned. While I'm throwing out warnings, there's also limited firmware included. Support for Marvell network cards, for example, is mostly missing, and there are some special requirements around sleep modes. The TLDR, though, is basically...
Honestly, I'm surprised, like, how open it is, considering it's specifically made for the Steam Deck. The fact that you can even get it working on a desktop system, honestly, a big part of the reason why it probably does is because it's just easier to test it if they don't want to test it on an actual Steam Deck, like testing it internally. But also, these requirements and the issues with the installer, this is why if you want a SteamOS-like experience today, just install Bazit. Just do it. It'll give you 99% of what you want. No, it's not the Valve branded thing, but all of the games that work also work on that. Anyway, here's the actual machine they're testing on.
For our test system then, we went with an AMD Ryzen 5 5600G on an Asus Prime B550MA motherboard with 16 gigs of DDR4 memory from G.Skill. That's a big Steam Deck.
It's a pretty big case for what the system is as well.
We did notice some mentions of NVIDIA in recent SteamOS patch notes, so we did try installing with an RTX 3060 GPU, but while we were able to boot the USB drive and we were able to clone the image to the NVMe drive, we were not able to continue with the setup process and instead got this garbled screen.
I do wonder what those are in reference to. My best guess would maybe be like an eGPU, but it's really hard to say.
Today does not include troubleshooting drivers or the Linux boot process.
Bad idea.
I don't care if you think it's easy, Joey doesn't. So we listened to Valve and switched back to a Radeon RX 7600, where we had a much better time getting through the actually refreshingly simple setup. Pick a language, pick a time zone.
It's almost like it's made for a touchscreen.
Pick a network and let it do its thing. Now, I don't know why I get a battery low warning on a desktop, but in the grand scheme...
Well, you don't have a battery. So wherever it's checking for the battery percentage, it's not finding any battery charge there. So clearly it's low. Again, this is made for a Steam Deck. I'm surprised the installer even works on a desktop and doesn't make some weird assumptions about it being a Steam Deck.
After a quick scroll and click, we're off to the races in game mode. Now, you've probably all seen the Steam Deck interface at this point.
Yes.
Cosmetically, it's basically desktop big picture, but...
99% desktop big picture, with a couple of very small additions, like the performance controls in the side panel.
Valve tries to squeeze out a little bit of extra horsepower by running it on the lighter weight GameScope microcompositor instead of in the full desktop environment that we'll look at in just a moment. The UI is okay with a keyboard and mouse, but it's really designed to be navigated with a controller from the moment you boot to the moment you finish your last one more round and then head to bed. Let's give it a shot. Oh, you got one of my favorite games on here, let's go!
He's very Canadian.
No way. Is this the new Hori Steam controller?
Yep.
Definitely a controller.
Definitely a controller.
These not even analog triggers?
I've heard, yeah, as I said, very Canadian. I've heard a lot of very mixed things about that controller. Mostly negative things. My understanding is Hori actually does make good controllers, but the Steam controller is kind of a cash grab.
Boom, take that. Oh no. I think the most remarkable thing about this gaming experience is that there's absolutely nothing remarkable about it. This is exactly what it's like to play this game on Windows. Complete chaos.
And that is the case on basically every distro. And again, I get the obsession with doing things on SteamOS, but that is the experience I got on my system. That is the experience you'll get on Bazet. That is the experience you'll get on Fedora or Ubuntu. It kind of just works. Now, if you're playing competitive shooters, well, that's a whole nother issue because a lot of those just don't work. But come play Marvel Rivals.
That's what I thought. Oh, this controller feels really cheap. Can I switch over to a different one?
I can find something, yeah.
Anything
It's probably
else?
the controller, Jordan. It's got to be it's a controller issue. Is the dongle in there?
You have a cable right in front of you you could probably use.
I mean, that's an option, I guess. Oh, it's an Xbox controller. I mean, sure, yeah, that should work. Okay, here we go. Theoretically, this should just flawlessly work because, you know, SteamOS, let's go.
Nothing to do with SteamOS in this case. That is entirely based on Steam input. It is the same reason why every controller is going to work on Windows as well. Valve has done a lot of work to make it so controllers just basically generically work. Now, some games are a bit weird about hot-plugging controllers and, like, won't swap over, won't change button prompts, but for the most part, things are just going to be good. Not because of SteamOS, but still because of Steam.
It's such a seamless experience. It's kind of mind-blowing to me. Like, I know SteamOS has been out for years now at this point, but the fact that this just works so flawlessly, so effortlessly is mind-blowing to me. Okay, break up.
As I said earlier, if this is the copium that people need to accept that Linux gaming is good, if they desperately need SteamOS to finally accept it, bring on SteamOS, I guess. More people on Linux, more things being solved. Whatever it takes.
Man, I gotta set this up in my living room. Like, I have a Windows install that has Steam on it and is configured to launch Steam in big picture mode every time I turn it on, but I never bother with it because it's Windows and it's just like stupid and tedious and Windows Update and just like, ugh.
What I will say is, whilst Linux will bug you a lot less about needing to update, please actually update your system. There are a lot of people, especially on distros like Mint, who traditionally did not do so. Whether on SteamOS, Ubuntu, Arch Linux, by the way, it needs to be updated to ensure you have the latest security patches, latest drivers, all that fun stuff.
It's not a console-like experience, and that's ultimately what you want in the living room. You don't want to get up and go find your stupid mouse and keyboard, and like, you can use a mouse and keyboard. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but you don't have to. You can just be ready to go. That's the Steam.
If you have Windows auto-launching Steam in big picture mode, wouldn't that pretty much be a console-like experience? Because consoles will force you to update nowadays. So, I don't know, like, at least from my perspective, it seems like pretty much the same thing. Now, that's not me saying go use Windows instead of Linux. Go use Linux instead. Windows Update is a lot more annoying and will, like, update you in the middle of gaming. But, at least from what I understand, that doesn't seem like as much of a selling point.
If you don't have a Steam controller,
Yeah.
Xbox button and A will bring that up.
Okay. It's Xbox button and A.
Yeah.
All right.
On regular big picture, on like a regular system, this menu will still appear, but it has like your friends list and things like that. Most of this Steam Deck stuff only exists on SteamOS. I think it might be there on Bazard as well, but this is something that I do think actually is really cool and probably should be expanded in regular big picture mode as well. Obviously, some of the stuff here just doesn't really make sense. Like TDP limiting a desktop system doesn't make sense, but having a frame limit, having the performance overlay, that stuff directly built into the game interface, I actually think would be very nice.
And, oh, we can enable HDR. I wonder if it's gonna work though. We can try it in Doom Eternal. Let's try it in Doom Eternal. Why does it not look that HDR-y?
It's just...
Oh, because the game is not in HDR.
Yeah, that will... that will usually do it.
Okay, all right. Well, that'll help. Cool. Let's go with Ultra and no ray tracing.
That's probably a better bet.
Valve has done some work on getting HDR to work in Linux with the Steam Deck OLED. What I don't know is how well it's going to work on a TV. This TV also not the brightest HDR TV, so maybe not our best case scenario for testing. In fact, honestly, it looks not great. I do wonder how much of it is the TV though, but everything.
I'm gonna say all of it is the TV. HDR works perfectly fine if you have an HDR display. If you have a bad HDR display and you're playing a game that does HDR badly, it's gonna look bad. That has nothing to do with the HDR work that Valve has done with GameScope, the HDR work for the rest of the GPU stack. That's just a shit TV problem.
All of a sudden, you got good.
Right? It's almost like there is a superior control scheme.
Nah, couldn't be.
Oh, what?
I am mostly a controller player, I will be honest. However, I will never, ever play another shooter with a controller. I mainly play action RPGs. Controllers are just better for that. Controllers are better for racing games, but if I'm playing Doom, if I'm playing Marvel Rivals, I'm gonna play with keyboard and mouse 100% of the time.
I would say that one glaring problem is that games launch at the Steam Deck's native 1280 by 800 resolution, but this can be fixed by manually setting the system resolution in the settings, and then games should pick that up.
I'm curious why it does that. It did mention there, automatically set the resolution. It could be thinking that the display you have attached is the internal display, so it's trying to render it at the Steam Deck resolution. That would be my only sensible guess, because plugging an external monitor into a Steam Deck works just fine. So, again, this isn't made for generic hardware.
Between Proton and native Linux versions of games, there's a huge
All 5 of them.
library now. Like, man, compared to the last time we did a gaming on Linux video, there's an enormous library of games that just work now.
No, definitely not compared to last time. Last time, that library was already there. Like, they all worked perfectly fine. The games that were problematic then are still problematic now. The games that worked well then still work well now. There's more games just because there's more games, but it's not like a lot of games just didn't work back then. It's a lot of the, like, issues that are resolved, but, like, as for things just straight up not working, hasn't been like that for maybe 5 years.
And while there have been some regressions, notably for online competitive titles where the developer developers don't want to maintain their anti-cheat on Linux.
Because they think that there's more cheaters on Linux. Come play Marvel Rivals. It's Steam Deck playable. Not verified yet. Not verified yet. But hopefully soon, if they get rid of their stupid launcher.
Game compatibility has mostly been growing steadily. I think
it's certainly gotten better, but a lot of the compatibility isn't games just flat out going from not working to working. It's more of just like things working better.
With the right hardware, I'm pretty much ready to say that building a SteamOS game console for your living room is pretty awesome.
As I said, I do most of my gaming on Linux. The only things I play on the PS5 are games that are not on PC. Like I'm playing through Stellar Blade right now. But if you're not someone who plays competitive shooters, if you're not someone who plays these like heavy anti-cheat multiplayer games, there is no reason you can't game on Linux.
Power and switch to desktop. That was quick.
Wow. It's KD. It looks a little bit different to mine because this is KD Plasma 6. The Steam Deck SteamOS is still running at Plasma 5. Also, they've got it like themed around like a Valve-y theme.
Quick. It looks like pretty much any other Linux desktop. Although,
well, unless it's GNOME. Because that looks a bit different.
Isn't quite. SteamOS 3 is what's known as an immutable operating system. If you already know what that means and you have strong feelings about it, SteamOS is probably not meant for you. If you don't know what that means,
I can forgive Linus for saying immutable distro because the term atomic is sort of only a relatively recently adopted one.
Oversimplified TLDR is, it means you can't screw it up too badly because it
in the case of SteamOS, you definitely can, because there is a SteamOS dev mode, and you can do some, you can break stuff with that.
locks down critical system components, and it will reset itself when you reboot.
No, it doesn't. He's already pinned a comment about that, but he says that a couple of times throughout the video. It does not reset itself on reboot. The image is replaced upon updating to a new version. Little bit different.
It doesn't mean you can't install software. It just means that you're effectively limited to what's available in their Flatpak-based Discover Software Center. These Flatpaks might not be as efficient.
Let's see. I reckon that's Libidwaiter. Probably Libidwaiter. I reckon Libidwaiter. I think though, yeah, those are probably Libidwaiter as well. Probably. I don't know where the others though. I think that one's not.
As if you installed VA Package Manager, but what it shows is that Valve learned very well from their community's love of, hey, how do I fix X in Counter-Strike? Press F10. Trolling.
I've never played Counter-Strike. I don't know what that does. Let me know down below.
Has taken place over the years. They've made SteamOS pretty hard to bung up too badly, because
it's hard to ruin it if you don't know what you're doing. If you do, you can break it. Now, one thing Linus doesn't mention is there is another way to install software. You can make use of a thing called Distro Box. If you want to mess around with the command line a little bit and do all of that stuff, read a bit of documentation, you can install software from literally any distro out there. But for the most part, it's intended that you're going to use things through Steam because it's the Steam Deck. On the desktop, though, if you want to install additional things, mostly you're going to go with Flatpak.
Let's see. Our browsers, oh, internet, there.
I like that Linus is looking for a browser. There is literally Firefox pre-installed on SteamOS. It's right there.
Okay, web browsers. Wolf, Vivaldi.
Wait, do you notice that one? Wait, I have to do a video on that one at some point. NCSA Mosaic. Yes, that actually is available on FlatHub. There's also an app image of it. Don't worry, we'll talk about that one in a separate video.
Vivaldi. Brave, just the Chromium web browser. Man, there's a ton of options here. This is great. And if you consider how much of it you do in a web browser these days, there's a good chance that we can get a lot of what we need to do done.
Absolutely
what about
true.
Discord, though? We mentioned Discord earlier.
That is available.
Discord. Hey, there it is.
Or desktop, or web cord, or ARM cord, or DAT cord, whatever DAT cord is.
4 stars. Boom. Install. Shameless plug for the LTT Commuter Backpack. We've got a lot more information available on it now, but in a nutshell, great backpack, 150 bucks. Go for it.
It better be a great backpack for $150 US.
Dstore.com. What else we got here? Oh, dude!
Oh no, we've lost them forever.
Yeah, this actually is Space Cadet Pinball.
Space Cadet Pinball's in here. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Here we go, let's go.
Yeah. This is not a joke. This actually is a thing that exists. So this is actually part of a decompilation project that is on a lot more than just Linux. So all of these different things, there is a version of Space Cadet Pinball for. By the way, this is how I play pinball as well.
Bah!
Yeah.
Really? Bah! Come on! Come on! Oh.
Not at all relevant to the main point, but I just had to show that bit.
Things. And other than that, it pretty much just works like I would expect a computer to work. Pretty much. We did run into a funny scenario a little while ago. We were trying to get an old printer working with generic drivers, and I had a brainstorm that went, oh man, Linux! I bet Linux will work. Well, I'll just grab
Imagine thinking, I have a problem with printing, I'm going to use Linux. This is how you know Linus is not like a Linux user, because no Linux user on the planet would ever think that.
a Steam Deck. That already has Linux on it, and yeah, that's when I learned that SteamOS does not include support for printers out of the box.
This is another thing that he has pinned as well. It does have support for it, but it is not enabled out of the box currently. Again, because the Steam Deck, or the SteamOS for the Steam Deck, is for the Steam Deck, and most people are not plugging their Steam Deck into a printer. They're using it as a gaming device.
And you might come across similar gotchas over time. Let's see if they've added it. No, they have not. Neat.
I don't think he even knows where he should be looking for it.
So, SteamOS. It's pretty great right now, but it's clear that there's a bit of work to be done. So,
Like every other distro.
what about those rumors we were talking about?
Well, what about using Bazit? What about using the distro that is not made by Valve, but is SteamOS for generic hardware? Fun fact, the official Fedora YouTube channel commented exactly this on the video. And I like that Fedora comments here, and it's not even the top comment. It's not even close to the top comment.
With that said, is SteamOS 3 ready to dethrone Windows? Not yet. There's a
SteamOS 3, absolutely not, because Valve is not pushing it to be that, because it's made for the Steam Deck, not for, like, generic things. However, is Linux gaming ready to dethrone Windows? I think it depends on the kind of games you play, right? I think if you are the kind of person who wants to play single-player games, multiplayer games that don't use anti-cheat, co-op games, things like that, yeah, actually, yes. If you are the kind of person who wants to play games like Apex Legends, Valorant, League of Legends, Fortnite, no, absolutely not. That's just not going to happen. And a lot of these companies have explicitly said they do not want to support Linux. There is a chance maybe specifically supporting the Steam Deck, but generically supporting Linux, I just don't see that happening for some titles, at least with the current way that anti-cheat functions.
So here's what I'd say is on Valve's to-do list. They need a simple installer, they need out-of-the-box support for a lot more hardware, and just one or two more passes of spit and polish. Also printer support. I do believe that they're gonna get there though, especially.
This is so funny to watch as someone who daily drives Linux. And like, it would be one thing if Linus didn't acknowledge that Bazit existed, but like, it's in the script for the video. Like, he is aware that Bazit is a thing that would solve all of these problems. And other people have done videos on Bazit and said Bazit's great. For whatever reason, though, SteamOS is just the thing that some people are pushing for.
Especially if Microsoft decides they want to risk their market share by forcing their store on everyone. Or if they keep making unreasonable hardware demands. Now I think all that's left is to unreasonably demand that you hear this message from our...
Okay. As I've said a couple of times throughout the video, if SteamOS is the copium that some people need to actually daily drive Linux, look, it's going to be the copium that some people need. Now, if you're someone who is willing to actually think about the system they're running, and you actually want to try out Linux today, baz it. If you want a system like SteamOS, baz it. That is your best bet. If you want something, you know, just generally good for a desktop system that isn't immutable or atomic, go install EndeavourOS, go install Fedora, go install Ubuntu. Just look up Best Linux Distro 2024 and pick something on the list, because it's going to be basically a good enough experience. But what do you think? Do you game on Linux? Have you gamed on Linux before? And are you running Linux today? Most of my viewers probably are, but if you came across this as someone who's new to the channel, let me know down below. So if you like the video, go like the video. And if you really like the video and you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out my Patreon, subscribe to LiberaPay, linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and just use Bazit. Just do it.
Something like this.